Welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. Our number one concern, shit hitting the fan. Our number one job, getting ready. That's why we're preppers, right? Anyways, I want to thank everyone here on Patreon. You've done a fantastic job of supporting the channel, supporting our research, supporting me in many different ways, and it is much appreciated and much needed. And I'll ask you to continue to do so. And for my part, I'm going to continue to bring you a different perspective and a different understanding and the different angles and ways that we're seeing shit hitting the fan, seeing its development, how it's going to affect us, and how we need to think about it. So I've talked frequently about money. Money makes the world go round, right? And how our money system, as it crumbles and comes down, how we have less of it, money, or a representation of wealth, how we're getting less and less of it, and how ultimately it's going to be a contributing factor to shit hitting the fan. It's going to be a contributing factor while shit is hitting the fan. And ultimately, after shit is done hitting the fan, money is going to have a lot to do with how the world develops. Now, interestingly, money makes the world go round, but it doesn't do a bit of good to shove a bunch of paper bills or cryptocurrency into the tank of your car. This video, this discussion is about energy, though. Money finances the pursuit of energy. And right now, our energy comes from oil, right? It is an oil-based economy, right? Oil drives our cars. It powers our lights. It's responsible for our standard of living. From the ice maker, you can hear, to the refrigerator, to the microwave, to the computers. We need energy, right? To deliver things, to have things transport around the world, whether it's in a ship, a train, a car, a plane, any of those things. We need energy. And right now, right, they're trying to switch to electric cars, but where does that electricity come from? Oil. Oil-based products, oil, gas, etc. So I've got a couple of articles here, and they're critical, I think, to understanding what is happening. Now, I have to start off, preempt the entire discussion with, a couple of years ago, I said oil prices are going to go higher. They need to go to $85 a barrel minimum in order for oil in America to be profitable. Shale oil primarily, and also the Arctic oil up at Anwar. Right when Trump got in and he said, hey, we're going for the oil, I thought it has to go higher. It absolutely must go higher in order to support itself. Otherwise, we're subsidizing it. Subsidizing it as taxpayers. We're subsidizing it, this is how shale has gone, by the issuance of bonds to investors who thought they're going to make a bunch of money, and that they're going to be paid back and then some, right? With dividends and profits. That's what the model was. And it was going to be supported by higher oil prices. To my shock and dismay, they weren't able to get those prices up. There has been an enormous struggle, not only in the world of money, gold and silver and real assets, but there's been this struggle in oil, which is energy, which is the most necessary component to actually physically move things with energy, right? And so I've got articles here saying, we've got big troubles. And the reason is there's something behind the scenes causing a competition in prices to battle out who gets to control the energy. So OPEC, which is the oil producing countries of the world, right? They're a cartel. It used to be largely Arabian area of the world, or Middle East, if you don't like the term Arabian Peninsula and Arabian this and that, right? OPEC countries. That's where the oil reserves were that we wanted to exploit, use, consume first. America has massive oil reserves, and we have now tapped them, and we're tapping other ways to get energy out of the ground. And it's being done because America needs to be energy independent. It was before President Trump became president. There was always this concern over America's energy independence. Right? It's a major national security issue, and it is. Our energy is our way of life. It is our standard of living depends on inexpensive energy. But to produce energy here is very expensive. Fracking, shale oil, it's not only environmentally destructive and dangerous, but it's also expensive, right? But we have other areas of the world that have been developed on oil and energy, and they want to continue their standard of living. They don't want to just stop pumping oil out of the ground and go broke because they have no other form of income, right? I'm talking once again about the Middle East, right? And so they have been competing with us wanting to develop our own oil because of these games that are being played, these political games for power and control. So OPEC needs a miracle to push oil prices higher. This is a oilprice.com story. Right? It's not a secret. OPEC has painted itself into a corner by relying exclusively on supply control to be able to manipulate international oil prices in a way that is favorable for its members. First sentence right out the gate, bam! They have relied on supply control to manipulate international oil price to their benefit. Yeah, they want to manipulate the price so they can be rich and wealthy and powerful. And they've relied on the supply, right? The supply, whether or not they produce more or less oil to limit or increase the supply to raise or lower prices. That's what they have been able to do so far. But now they've got a problem, right? They're in a corner. Why? Because there's American oil out here now. Right? Our agreement with them is don't screw us and give us a lot of oil, and we'll continue to buy your oil and not supply our own. Well, guess what? We supply our own now. Right? The shale patch is doing so well now that U.S. oil production is at an all-time high, with the country last year becoming the world's largest producer. Meanwhile, OPEC and its partners, led by Russia, decided to cut again. This time, however, the cuts didn't work. The idea that if they make oil cuts, prices will go up, and for the oil they produce, they'll get more money for it. Didn't work. Prices remain subdued, save the occasional short-lived rally. While it's true Brent and WTI, which are Russian and American oil grades, are both higher than they were before the second round of cuts, the international benchmark is much lower than OPEC's largest producers. Okay. The reason these cuts aren't working is that market movers are not watching them. They are watching the tariff match between Washington and Beijing, a match that could hurt global oil demand. In other words, the economy is coming down. That's why we're having tariff wars and trade wars and currency wars, developing, expanding, and consuming the world. As a result of these economic wars that have started because the economy has been coming down. So there's more pressure, so governments, their ability to cooperate and get along comes down. So we're having more tariffs, more trade wars, more currency wars, right? The pressure for economic war goes up as the economies come down. As economies come down, the need for oil comes down. People don't have the money to travel. They don't have the money to go places on the weekend. They don't have the money to spend on all these things that consume more energy in a variety of different ways, whether it's travel, heating, air conditioning, right? Whatever it is, it does take energy, and that energy comes from the overall international oil supply. So OPEC is in big trouble. In other words, we are having an economic war with the oil-producing countries, the OPEC countries, which includes Venezuela, which includes Russia, which includes Africa. Right? Anywhere oil is produced, they're in competition with the United States. And our number one, right? We're number one with oil production. We sell it to other countries like Japan. Japan doesn't have its own energy reserves. China doesn't either. which is fascinating to me, such a large landmass with no oil under it. But they're cutting nice deals with, sounds like Iran and other countries. They'll get their oil one way or another, right? It is big, big trouble. Now, got another article here. Sluggish oil demand to keep a lid on oil prices amid global recession fears. Right? This story supports the idea that the economy uses oil, and when the economy comes down, we use less oil. And that has kept the price down, especially since the U.S. is increasing production. So if we're increasing production, price comes down. As the economy comes down, price comes down more. Now, what's fascinating about this is we go back to shale oil. The reason we're able to produce it is being subsidized. It has to be. And that subsidization comes from the issuance of stock and bonds. That is, investors in America putting up the money to try and produce this oil. They want to put in 1 unit of energy, $1 or $1 million, and get $5 million of oil out. They would really like 30 million or 20 or 10, but the energy return on investment is very low with shale. In other words, it's money, capital, and energy expensive to produce. And the lower the oil price, the less they make. And in fact, they're not making any money, which is why I said years ago they need $85 and higher. Right, Arctic oil is extremely expensive. Shale and fracking is extremely expensive. Not to mention that the oil that comes out of shale oil, it's very light. Our refineries are set up to handle a heavier crude, and so we need to redo our refineries if we're going to live on this stuff. But it's not really about America's energy supply. That's not the primary, or rather the only reason having that energy. It's to fight this energy war that's going on, right? Without oil sales, the Middle East falls. Without the Middle East having some sort of income, right, that would result in wars, right? We already know that in the West we have wars over economics and failure of economic systems. How quickly will the Middle East just completely dissolve into war? So, it's a two-edged sword energy right now. We need low oil prices to drive what little economic momentum we have forward. Our economy's coming down, and we need to give it every opportunity and break in order to keep it moving forward. So they're throwing money at it. Here's some free money at 0% interest rates. Build an economy. Well, instead, corporations take that, buy back their own stock, give themselves big fat bonuses, claim they're making all kinds of money, raise their stock prices, but it hasn't helped the economy. We don't have more factories. We don't have more production. We don't have better, cheaper products. We don't get that. We're just getting more debt, right? But we need cheap oil. That is part of this overall, how do we keep the economy going package. Money makes the world go round. Oil makes the world go round. Innovation, product development, inventions, those make the world go round. We have to keep making things better to advance them, and we're not getting there. Or the way to getting there is getting more and more and more expensive. So they're keeping oil prices. They have to. The moment oil or energy goes up, guess what? People stop spending. And this is a consumer economy. It is a sales, retail, service economy. It is not a manufacturing and industrial economy anymore. That's only, I think, 11% of our GDP comes from manufacturing. Everything else, pushing paper around. It's, not to put down paper pushing, that's my job, right? I understand business administration. But you have to do more than just push papers from desk to desk. There has to be something on that paper having to do with things that are produced. Anyways, to stay on target here, sluggish oil demand will keep a lid on oil prices. You see, oil is something that once it's discovered, we've got decades of production out of a single well. Now, once you get past the cost of developing that well, the money or the oil that comes out creates a revenue stream. that revenue stream becomes relied upon to support all the infrastructure, to support that corporation, to support an economy that is counting on that oil. So we have over here decided we need to have our own energy in the United States. The world has its desires. And so there is a glut of oil. They tried reducing their oil production in the Middle East in order to bring prices up. The U.S. said, we don't care. We're just going to keep pumping out even more and more. Now we're number one in the world. So now the other game is, well, let's do this. Let's, in the Middle East, in the Arabian Peninsula, let's produce even more oil and get into an oil war. An oil war. Overproduce. Even though we know, right, that oil supplies are dropping, we're past peak oil. Oil's getting more expensive to produce. Still, let's pump it out of the ground even faster to confound our enemies, to lower the price and see who gives first. In other words, this is a tug of war, but instead of pulling on the rope, everyone's letting go of the rope and saying, how do you like that? Right? We're not even going to fight you. We're just going to let you run with this and see who gets exhausted running backwards, pulling the rope. Right? But no one's pulling. They're just shoving oil out there. If oil, and so that's going to create a problem. What if oil drops to $40 a barrel? What if it drops to 20? What happens then? Right? Oh shit, man, gas, it dropped down to $2.50 a gallon. Right? Because most of our gas price actually goes into tax and regulation, not how much it costs to come out of the ground. Right? But if oil price drops, who's that going to hurt? It's going to hurt the oil producing companies all around the world. Right? So shale, if it's barely making any money or going in debt, and they've been going in debt, you can follow all of this at srsroccoreport.com. He talks about oil and he talks about precious metals. If the oil price drops, that destroys and blows up the market. All the investors who have been subsidizing the oil industry, thinking they're going to get rich, are going to go flat broke to the tune of billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. Right? And I know in a world where we now talk about trillions of dollars, billions doesn't sound like it's that big a deal, but it is. Right? It would be really easy for all of these companies to go out of business, have all the investors lose their asses, literally, and then have someone else, like the government or some government quasi-corporation, come along and say, we'll now administer the oil industry, but we don't want any of the losses. Right? They're all developed, they're all set up, they all produce, and they'll manage that. But all of the old debt goes away. How's that for debt forgiveness? For everyone who wants debt forgiveness. Debt comes in many forms. Some people call them investments, but I call them debts, right? That's why I don't invest in other companies, because there are issues with people making decisions and lying and taking investors' money and then saying, whoops, sorry, right? I gave them money and they could take it and use it to make money and then tell me, whoops, we lost all the money and you get no money? I don't think so, right? I don't play that game. Anyways, we've got this. Now, shit hitting the fan. Let's get back into that for just a few minutes there. And once again, thanks everyone. Thank you so much for watching and sharing your ideas. OPEC needs a miracle. What causes oil to go up in price? And it hasn't. All of the risk of war in Iran, 15, 20, 30 years ago, any of this action going on in and around Iran with capturing ships and threats of war and shooting down drones, oil prices would have skyrocketed. OPEC, know what it needs? It needs a war. It needs a war. That is the miracle. It doesn't need a miracle, it needs a war. And war isn't a miracle. War is created through human action. OPEC can threaten the world with war. Right? All they have to do. And who's OPEC again? Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. These countries all have missiles and rockets and planes. They have warships. And all they have to do is start sinking oil tankers We're blowing up refineries and oil warehouse, oil storage areas, those big tanks. All they have to do is blow the living shit out of that, and they'll stop production. And if they're already going out of business, right, Aramco? If they're already going out of business and failing, it won't hurt them a bit. Right? They're already fucked, in other words. They might as well go to war. When they go broke, nations go to war. Now, the United States, thankfully, has got its own energy supply. We're the #1 in the world. We can live off of our own energy supply. But that doesn't mean that shit hasn't hit the fan as a result of it. That war isn't started so that OPEC, right, can start putting out oil at a very expensive price. They need a war, and it is very scary, and it's a very real potential, and it's not being talked about in the manner that I'm discussing it. They're talking about price and how much they can sell and how much they get. Right? Oil demand is low. We need a miracle in pricing. Now, wars are fought over energy and oil. Wars. Our involvement in Syria was about energy. Our involvement in Iraq was about energy. Our involvement in Afghanistan was about opium, apparently. But our energy needs, our involvement with Venezuela and the offshore oil reserves that have been discovered, that I believe are in dispute with Guyana, it's about energy. It's about oil. Controlling that, controlling the supply, controlling the price. This. Go ahead and read both articles. The last paragraph in the oilprice.com tells us what Saudi Arabia wants. $80. They want $80 oil. America needs $85 oil. But guess what? Right, the market isn't supporting it because the economy is coming down, and the odds of shit hits the fan are going up in the world of energy. Chance favors the prepared mind is yours. Thank you again for all the support, for all the love. You guys get prepared. Food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. Godspeed to all. I'll talk to you again very, very soon.